Hi, I'm Amber Petty, and I'm very excited to be speaking to Paula on her podcast. And we're going to go behind the scenes of all sorts of places, and we're going to talk about the beauty and joy of being a true hustler.
Welcome to Pure Grit with Paula McGrath. If you search the word grit, you'd see that it means to have courage, show strength of character, passion, and perseverance. Throughout the series, Paul will chat to guests from all walks of life who have shown pure grit to get to where they are now. Paula, yeah, look, your hair looks fine. I've done the intro, so ready for you to talk now. Yeah, you do your talking thing.
Welcome to today's episode of Pure Grit. My next guest is actually someone I really admired in my early career when I was in radio in Sydney and in television at Channel V. She came across to me as smart, sassy, strong, beautiful, but she looked to me like a true hustler and had what it takes. And she certainly did, because she has had a fantastic career. She was publicities and promotions manager of major record labels back then in my day. I think it was Warner and Festival. So she's bringing all the big stars to the radio station and then to Channel V as well. Working at cool magazines, I remember too. I think it was like then TV Hits, maybe something else, like New Idea. She was a columnist as well, but then carved out an amazing career herself in television and in radio, and is a brilliant podcaster herself and the best storyteller in her podcast. But most of Australia, you'll know her not only from Celebrity Survivor, but she became really famous to all of you, which is not how I knew her, but being Princess Mary's bridesmaid. Please welcome the beautiful Amber Petty.
Oh, Paula, what a gorgeous intro. And I love the fact that you know me from a really interesting time in my life, which was those music days.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, as you said, you know, a lot of people in terms of general public, you know, not so much in South Australia because I did a radio show there, so yes, they know me. But yeah, as you said, you know, a lot of people would only know me as being sort of, you know, Princess Mary's best friend and, you know, and the Royal Bridesmaid stuff. So I'm excited to be able to talk to it. And I really love the way that's a really beautiful kind of reflection of how you saw me out there doing my thing. And I was hustling my ass off.
You were. Amanda, I knew we were similar age.
You just called me Amanda, by the way. We need Josh.
Pardon?
You just called me Amanda, so we might need
Josh. Amber, we'll need Josh for... Don't call you Amanda. What the hell?
I get that. I don't know why. People
Amber,
default... People default Amber with Amanda. Family members that used to do it to me. They're dead now. I didn't kill them because of it.
Oh, my gosh. I've lost my shit.
I better just stop you.
Yeah, no. Oh, gosh. I can't believe I didn't even know. You know why? Because before I was texting someone called Amanda. Isn't that funny? Just before. So my brain is obviously... Anyway, Amber.
I do, please don't apologize.
That's what we need, the beautiful Josh. Before you were saying we didn't need him, we actually do need him.
We do. That's called karma.
We cursed ourselves. But I did, Amber, know you back in your career. I just watched what you did, and I admired it, because when we're in radio and television, music television, that's what you need. You need the publicity promotions department bringing in the big stars to the show. So be like, oh gosh, she's got the coolest job. She hangs with them all day. That's what I used to think. Like, we get to quickly interview them, but you were hanging with them like they were your friends. And I'd be like,
yeah, and it was and wasn't that way. I mean, there's always there's always truth to what someone sees a lot of the time. And it certainly was a cool job. And anytime I would say, you know, people would say, oh, you know, what do you do for a job? And I'd say, oh, you know, I'm, you know, promotions and publicity manager at Mushroom Records or Warner Music. Instantly, everybody around only wants to talk about your job. And that is kind of cool, but it's also can be a bit exhausting, because I also knew that, you know, the downside of the job. You know, I was always exhausted because,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you are hanging out with rock stars every other night, but you know, you're often like a bit of a glorified taxi driver. You're often sitting there going, oh God, what time can I get them out of this nightclub and get them back to the hotel? Because I know we all have to be at radio or interviews by 9 a.m. the following morning. And I'm going to be the mug that has to get myself up, but also then has to get to a hotel and drag, you know, 5 hungover, you know, rock stars out of bed and try and get them sense to radio or TV or whoever it is, because we want, you know, my job is to make sure that, you know, if it's people like you were at Channel V, to play their music.
That's
so
right.
it was a lot, and it was exhausting, but it also was very cool.
So for you, was there lots of drinking and all of that back in the day? Because that's what was involved.
Look, it absolutely. I mean, there is, you know, there's no, you know, we think about kind of Australia being, you know, everything is so kind of monitored and policed in terms of everything, which is fantastic. But there really wasn't any policing going on back then about us as women in environments where, you know, whether it's our bosses at the record company, or whether it is the musicians, or whether it's their managers, the tour managers, whatever component you're hanging out with, often people intoxicated, often they're on drugs, and you as a woman are in lots and lots and lots of compromising positions, and but you are also slightly compromised sometimes, because, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. It wasn't the professional environment where you would sit there and not have a drink, because people don't like people sitting there feeling like they've got a teacher or their, you know, guardian. So, you know, if you're sitting there and you're with a band, you know, whether it's like Filter or Live or, you know, a million of the bands, they want you to get pissed with them. It was definitely a strange job. And you're also, you know, I look back on it, and I was 27 when I started that job. And I remember exactly, because, to be honest, I had literally the year before, I had finished the longest relationship that I've still had to date, which was 6 years. And so I sort of fell in love and got engaged when I was sort of 21, 21. Yeah, and I was the last person in the world that ever thought that they were going. I thought only people that, you know, were really naive got married, or, you know, got engaged, or weddings. Like, that was never on my radar. I came from divorced family. I grew up, you know, by the age of 10, I thought I was so relieved that I knew not to aim for love and marriage and babies, because it all goes to shit. So I thought I was that's one massive thing, you know, out of the way in my life that I won't have to worry about. I mean, not a little kid at all.
Little no therapy. Well, similar. I mean, I came from divorced parents as well, so it wasn't I never dreamed of the dress. I never dreamed of that. I know girls that dream of getting married. Never entered my mind. Very similar in that way, you and I.
Yeah, in fact, and I don't think this is the same for everybody, but for me, very much, I think, because obviously love is a very big thing, and love can very quickly be kind of turned into fear. And so I think for me, it was fear, because I was so scared of loving and being rejected, and you know, finding out that, you know, someone that I'd fallen in love with was cheating on me or hurt, any of the things that I'd sort of grown up experiencing, you know, because I was obsessed with my father, and he wasn't around. That they split up when I was a baby. So yeah, so I say I accidentally fell in love with Justin, because I really, really, really fell hard in love. And he was an English guy, and we were in Crete on holiday. And so I ended up with him for 6 years, and and got engaged. That was sort of his idea. I was like, I don't know about this.
That's pretty young. You're like, yeah.
Oh, Tom, like, hang on, this is not, no, we don't do, this is not me. But I mean, what a shit fiance. I was like, okay, I'll wear the ring as long as you shut up about it now. I mean, what a huge romantic. Anyway, so when I finally broke up with him, and it was my decision, but it really didn't make it any less painful, I literally got my job at the record company in Melbourne at Mushroom Records, and I went, brilliant, here we go. I'm going to throw myself at this job, throw myself at the music industry, because this will be just a perfect way to just move on from heartbreak and just,
and sleep with lots of rock stars.
Yeah, well, I didn't necessarily do that. Although
you didn't. I mean, I thought they would be. You were so hot; they would have been hitting on you left, right, and centre.
Oh, bless you. Look, it's funny. I mean, yeah, of course, like there is plenty that I could have slept with, as could have other, my other female colleagues. But there was, it was this sort of, it's a really kind of difficult situation, because, you are young, your whole life, like I could never plan, like even if you said to me, Amber, my birthday's next Thursday night, can you come out for dinner? I would have to say to you, Paula, I would really love to, but I'm not sure whether I can commit to that, because I may have a schedule that comes in, and suddenly there's, even if it's like an Aussie, even if it's like Johnny Diesel's coming into town and you're going to be looking after him next Thursday, but I didn't necessarily know that. So I'm essentially just like an on-call publicist, but also glorified cab driver.
Yeah, driving them around.
Yeah. So what becomes is this very difficult situation where, obviously you're not supposed to be sleeping with rock stars, but everyone's partying. So you're partying as you would party, if it was just with your friends, except you've got rock stars and maybe someone else is picking up the tab. But you still are in an environment where everyone, feeling a bit sexy and whatever, and, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
And you're very sexy.
Paul had a skip. Oh, thank you, Paula. So obviously there were, times when us females would cross the line in some way, or, get caught up in something. But I look back at it and, our bosses, my direct boss was a female, and she was probably my age that I am now, and I'm about to turn 50. And her and a couple of the other females at the same age, there was something, I mean, obviously it's their job to say, hey, don't go around sleeping with, with the musicians.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt like there was jealousy there, because they'd been in the music industry for decades. They lived and breathed it, whereas I thought, I'm not going to be still in this music industry getting paid bullshit in a couple of decades and still going out every night and going to, like, that's not, like, as cool as this is, that ain't going to happen. I'm escaping well before. And there was just something about these women that there was just this slightly toxic feminine sort of looking down, waiting to be able to point the finger and say, this one's loose. Do you know what I mean?
I know it all right. Yeah.
That was rife, that shit, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know it. And the only
women shaming other women.
boss I ever had that wasn't, I had, luckily in my career, I had fantastic bosses, but the only boss that wasn't so good was female.
Yeah.
And, didn't have your back in any way, shape or form, the opposite.
Yeah, it's so true. And I do think, and I don't mean this certainly not across the board, but there is definitely there is a lot of people that are motivated by the cool and the sexy factor of working in the music industry, and so there is some ego that goes with that, and some sort of jealousy, because you do, like, most musicians, because they get up on a stage, because they have a talent, because they have fans, to most people that turns them into a sexy person. Whereas that, they could be going home and, the dirtiest, most feral, drummer or something that, still lives with his parents but might just be doing well in the band because it's early days or whatever. But when he's on tour, he's like super sexy and all of this sort of stuff. So there was a lot of kind of sexiness around that. And that does also inspire jealousy too, and also for the boys, the men that were
still have a lot of friendships with a lot of the bands?
Not so much the bands
or artists, or You know, like I still have some from my career that, you know, you help out early on in their career and they never forget. It's nice. They like never forget. They send you a little message or,
Yes. Yeah. There's a few, I mean, people like Sarah McLeod, not that I was actually that hands-on. I did work at Warner, and her promo manager, you know, who was my kind of like, you know, the same girl that looked after different labels. She looked after Sarah. So I did know kind of Sarah. I still know Sarah and speak to her occasionally, Sarah McLeod from the Super Jesus.
She's great, yeah. And I used to work with Leah at Channel V, her sister.
Oh, yes,
so they're both Adelaide girls like myself.
It feels like sometimes everyone came from Adelaide, except me. But then I still get told that I'm from Adelaide because I was on radio there.
All the good girls come from, all the good things and good girls come from Adelaide. So you would not have come from Adelaide. No, just joking.
Yeah,
all the good wine and all the good girls.
There's a lot of but also a lot of talent. A lot of radio talent came out of SAFM, because that was kind of like that was sort of at some point like one of the most successful stations in Australia, FM stations. It was SAFM. So there's an interesting kind of history back to there.
And anyway. I never worked in Adelaide because I left Adelaide at the age of 15. Yeah. So my career didn't take off till I moved out of Adelaide.
Yeah.
Because I was only young. I was at a girls' school in Adelaide, and then my mum decided to move and I had to go with her, of course. So kicking and screaming at that age, you know, you don't want to leave your friends and you grew up at that age.
What age was that?
I was like 15.
Oh, that's tough.
It was tough.
That's tough age. Really tough age to move. But I mean, yes, but I think a lot of people move out of Adelaide because there aren't a lot of jobs. When you're gunning for radio or something like that, what have you got? Like you got like a handful of options, and those people don't move very often. So you do have to get out if you've got aspirations for media or you know, entertainment.
So Amber, did you bring? I'm just trying to remember if it was. I thought it was you. When I was at Channel V, did you bring Britney Spears?
No, I didn't bring Britney Spears. But do you know what?
Britney.
No. Well, she was with Zomba.
Was Zomba. It was Zomba. It probably was Grant Gillies.
Probably one of my totally. But also it might have been Brooke Harry or Brooke Buchan.
Oh yes.
She's. You know, she's still so funny when you said, you know, are you still friends with any of the rock stars? Not so much, but but that group of girls group of girls and one guy, very small group, and we're at what was Mushroom Records that then became Festival Mushroom, and it was in Piedmont, and it was literally sort of, you know, down under the building, and I'm still incredibly close with that little posse that was, you know, we had such a unique time. We're all in our sort of, you know, mid to late 20s, you know, working this really crazy job that, you know, other people just like, really, they pay you to do that? That's crazy. And I'm not joking, like I am still, you know, in my top 10 best friends, there's sort of 5 or 6 of them from that crew that are still my besties.
Wow, isn't that lovely? Yeah, they were all very, very good people.
They're really cool.
All similar age. And I remember Britney coming. I think I was at Channel V. Britney came, and that week I think we had Britney, Jessica Simpson, and Mandy Moore. And the difference. They're all similar age. And Christina Aguilera. I'm
surprised they didn't punch the shit out of each other.
No,
they all pitted against each other, didn't they?
That's right. But the difference because they're all the similar age, but the difference in their personalities. Oh my goodness. Mandy Moore was just an absolute sweetheart. Right? Britney was just like
right out there.
Well, I think I remember I think she was sponsored by Pepsi, but then she was like drinking a Coke. I was like, what are you doing? I think it was on the media and everything.
Yeah, actually, their competitor have just paid you $10 million not to drink that can. Do you think you could pop that down? Do you know? It makes me laugh because I mean, I was never. So even though I was working in the music industry, to be honest, half the music that came to, because I didn't like pop. I was certainly not a Britney Spears. Any of those women you've just mentioned, I can't listen to that. And so I was very much, I've always been sort of a real rock and hip hop and rap, kind of gangster rap music ever since like I was like, you know, an early teen. And I remember once I moved down to, I was still in Melbourne working for Mushroom Records. And we had this big boardroom meeting with Michael Gudinski. And it was sort of like the weekly or every other week, you know, meeting where he'd bring in and say, right, we've got sort of, you know, someone would present the new product that was coming through the business. Anyway, this time Michael did the presentation. So we knew that it was going to be big. And he literally presented Britney Spears, who, of course, nobody had ever heard of. And he played the Hit Me, you know, Baby One More Time video.
Hit me, baby.
Correct. And I remember sitting at the end of the boardroom table going, oh my God, this is the biggest load of shit. There is no way this is going to be a hit. How embarrassing. Where's her mother? I mean, this is just kiddie porn. Like I was just, so I look back on that and think, I'm glad I kept that to myself.
Yeah, and me at that time at Channel V, that clip when we first dropped that clip, it was just huge, absolutely huge. The kids went crazy for it.
Yeah,
crazy
and that's
and it was kids, like young, you know, preteen.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But you know, certainly not.
Still, I should have been able to say that's going to be huge for this demographic, not just so crap. What are we even looking at? This is not going to work. I mean, Thankfully, I hadn't been there that long, so I didn't think I was worthy of mouthing off about what I thought about it. So
thank goodness.
Yeah, everyone else went, yeah, that's a hit. Yeah, that's a hit. You know, the music industry, though, there's so many, you know, people think it's full of cool people. It's actually full of a whole lot of nerds. You know what I mean? Like they all sit there doing this sort of nerdy kind of like jigging about when they're listening to new music. You know the type. Yeah. You know, and a lot of the men have kind of like, you know, they've come from a very humble space, like whether it's working out at the CD plant or it's going around flogging, you know, trying to sell music literally as a retailer, you know, as a sales rep. And then suddenly they get these middle management jobs in the record company and suddenly they're out there with their expense cards, you know, at gigs, you know, and all these girls are now trying to sleep with them because they're the cool guy in the music industry that's got free tickets and whatever. And I would just look at them and go, slow down. I know where you came from. Like, just relax.
That is so funny. And was it Taxi Ride you? I'm trying to think of what band I loved. It was Taxi Ride. I loved Taxi Ride when they used to come into Channel V. I loved those guys. It was them, wasn't it, with you?
Actually, yes, and I still speak to Jason now and again.
Oh, can you say hello?
Yeah, he's just a beautiful, beautiful guy. I actually got him.
Tim, Jason.
Two Tims were there.
Two Tims, that's right.
Blonde Tim, I should know his surname, the really tall blonde Tim.
Dark Tim.
And there was Dark Tim. And then there was the other guy, Dan or something like that.
Yeah. I love them.
Yeah.
Get set, everybody.
Do you know, so they were on the other label within Warner. So I didn't deal with them a lot, but because I was quite good friends with the other girl that looked after the other side of the business, I hung out with Taxi Ride a little bit. But I do remember she got me to pick them up from the airport one day because I can't remember where they lived, but I think actually most of them lived in Melbourne.
Like we're in Melbourne.
So she got me to pick them up from the airport, and I didn't like driving Taragos. I was a nervous driver. I didn't even get my license till I was literally about 4 seconds before I arrived in Sydney to work at Mushroom Record, where my whole job was driving. I'd got my license about 4 seconds before that. So I don't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I'm going up one-way street. I was constantly lost. Anyway, so I certainly didn't like driving Taragos with bloody maniac bands in it. And I picked them up from the airport in the Tarago. I reckon it was one of the first or second times I'd ever driven a Tarago. And those little bastards, well, at least one of them, and I won't name it, was smoking a joint. I mean, I could barely see. And then I'm getting stoned. And then he's talking to me, telling me all his jokes. I mean, how I didn't wrap us all went whole. I mean, seriously.
You, Emma, must have the best stories, the best.
What about, speaking of being in Tarago, actually it wasn't Tarago, but I constantly had all of these shit fights in terms of driving artists. And I didn't have any experience as a driver like that. And so obviously I wasn't going to tell my boss that. Yeah, I've got my license. Yeah, just got it. Yes, just came in the mail yesterday. I mean, they just assume you've had it for a long time. So I remember Shirley Manson from Garbage, who was the coolest woman. I had to bloody drop her. She was doing a big tour, a world tour, and Australia was sort of the back end of the world tour. So she was still really cool. She was really tired, and she had a gig one night at well, she probably had a couple at the Sydney Entertainment Centre, and I had to drop her off for rehearsals. And of course, I just couldn't find the gate to drop her off to go in the back way. So after about the sixth time of circling the entertainment centre, Shirley said, "Please stop the car. I'll just get out and find it myself." It was so embarrassing. And then, seriously, the same year, Mundawoy Yunapingu from Yothu Yindi, I was trying to take him to, we'd been to the ABC to do an interview, and then we got in the car, and he had to say to me, "I think this is a one-way street." You know, when you go past the ABC in Ultimo, where for part of the day it's one way and for part of the day it's double way?
That's right, yeah.
I don't know whether it still is like that. I mean, that's a stupid bloody thing. Anyway, of course, he's and he's notoriously known as being kind of loose and, you know, goes sort of out back, and he's the one saying to me, "We're driving up a main street in the middle of Sydney the wrong way."
Oh, Amber, you are the best. That is just absolute gold. So then what made you leave the record labels?
So I eventually moved on after a couple of, maybe 3 years. I think I was at Mushroom, and then it turned into a Festival Mushroom. Oh no, actually, that's right. That's why I left there, because when they did the merge between Mushroom and Festival Mushroom, over a period of about 12 months, people just started losing their jobs everywhere. And it was all the rumoured, you know, CDs were coming in, and like, no, sorry, not CDs were coming. Jesus, how old am I? I'm trying to make myself like 60 or 70. When it was CDs were around, but it was going, you know, there's all this rumour about the digital age, and no one knew what that was going to look like, and, you know, and how
we had no clue. We didn't have any.
No, it was terrible, and so people didn't know how much the businesses were going to take a hit. But, you know, when anything like that happens, there's a period of time where people, you know, stop spending and, you know, stuff like that. So when the merger happened between Mushroom and Festival, they started just chopping people, and they were chopping all these different people. And I felt really bad because, you know, my music knowledge was pretty basic, and all of these people that had been at Mushroom for like decades were getting the chop before me, and it was embarrassing. But eventually I did get the chop. Anyway, so we went and bought a whole lot of alcohol and cigarettes on the company's money, you know, expense account. We came back and got shit-faced and just trashed the joint like rock stars. So we went out literally ruined the joint.
Party.
Anyway,
so
did you go then I went to Warner Music.
Right.
And to be honest, it was after that experience, which I didn't enjoy at all. It was a hideous boys' club in there. Mm. It was a really different culture. I really, you know, for all Mushroom and Festivals, you know, issues and, you know, the takeover and stuff like that, you know, I did really love that beautiful grassroots feel about, you know, working for an indie label. And Warner was very different. And so I imagine this, right? So I'm 20, no, how old am I? No, so I'm nearly 30 by the time I'm at Warner. And so I have a 3-month appraisal, as many companies do. I had, hang on, let me think. There was Greg, 5 of the top guys at Warner sitting in a small office doing my appraisal.
Oh.
It was just bullshit. It was some weird ass. And I just remember just sitting there and thinking, I've got to, I don't, this is the fun. I don't like the feel of this business. There's no point in staying just because it's the cool job and it's Warner and you've got, like, I had this big office, like I'd gone from this sharing this, you know, graffiti covered office in this tiny space at Mushroom Festival to suddenly I've got this massive office, leather couches. I mean, how gross. You know, views of the city, and you know, I'm like bloody Tommy Mottola with this bloody office, and I just sat there and just thought, you can't stay because you've got a bloody office and a leather couch and views of this is bullshit. So I ended up interrupting one of them as he was giving me my appraisal, and I said, look, thank you, I just don't want to waste your time. You know, as the appraisal is not only about you, you know, giving your thoughts on me and whether you think we're a good fit, you know, it is the same for me, and I've decided to move on.
Oh,
can you imagine?
Their faces would have been like,
right, their faces, like they literally just went, their mouths were just hanging open. And I said, so I've decided to leave. And I just sit there and there was just silence. Like it literally, I had to redo the goodbye speech about 4 or 5 times because they were just stunned mullets. Wow. I don't think they'd ever had, and I was really gracious. I kept saying, in fact, one of the guys, Chris Moss, who was actually a really lovely guy.
Oh, I remember Chris Moss.
Yeah, he was a good guy. He was, and Mark Pope. Well, actually, Mark Pope said, he said, I'll never forget that.
I bet they never forgot.
We just could not believe you were going.
The audacity of you, Amber.
Yes, but he was really lovely. He's got a good heart, that guy. And he said, you know, I just thought you were so gracious in the way you did it, because, you know, it's you know, it's those formative moments, isn't it, where you're starting to honour yourself.
Yeah, see, I knew that about you. I saw that early in you. Like that story does not surprise me. See, I was
really,
yeah, no, I didn't know that story, and that does not surprise me at all. I think good on you. I would have been over in the corner. Whoop whoop. Go Amber.
Well, and you know what? I drove home that day in the car that I knew that I'd have to hand back. And I drove off crying that day. Oh. So, you know, I put on this big, brave, kind of gracious show. I did cry because I guess I didn't know where I was going to. I didn't know where my next job was. And I guess you don't know sometimes when you're young whether you're doing the right thing.
You don't know, and I remember feeling the same way. It's scary, but something within you says, I'm not going to work for someone like that ever again.
That's right. It's where you're acting on your integrity, and maybe you've never really even maybe you've never even been conscious of what integrity is and what your values are. But it is those moments where you're like, I'm going to act on something that I feel and I think this is right. And so, yeah, that's sort of what I did. So, yeah.
So then you went on to magazines. Was that when you went to magazines?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, so I ended up moving back to Melbourne for a time being because I had a really strong, and this is also a motivating factor of not putting up with bullshit at Warner, was that I just had this really strong feeling about my nana, and I just had this sort of voice inside me that was sort of saying, if you are still living this kind of life, that I felt that I was, you know, part of me was sort of judging as being quite a superficial, just sort of like there wasn't enough depth in it. And something happens to your, you know, to Nana, I'll never, ever forgive myself. And so she lived in Melbourne. So I did go back down to Melbourne for sort of between 3 and 6. It must have been about 6 months all up. And I was right. My Nana did die, but I at least got 3 months with her. So I don't have any regrets because I listened to those warning bells in me. And so, but then my friend Rachel Newman, who I worked with at Mushroom Records in that little crew, she was then over at Pacific Magazines, and she was sort of overseeing. Well, they'd recently bought Juice magazine. Do you remember Juice magazine?
Yes, I remember Juice. Yes.
Yeah. So Juice was a sort of small niche entertainment title, but when they brought it over to Pacific Magazine, who is now, you know, one of my best friends, Rachel, who's now global editorial director at Apple, based out of LA. Like, she's got I can't even.
Wow.
Oh my God! Speaking of grit and determination, but she turned Juice for, I think they only gave it 3 issues, but she turned Juice into this super cool music magazine.
Yeah,
so she invited me to come over to be marketing manager of that, and then I was also going to be marketing manager of TV Hits and Big Hit, which they were sort of merging. So that's when I ended up, that was sort of the start of my magazine career, which was another new cool world. But I got in the door through my music and entertainment contacts, because they wanted to bring that sort of stuff into it for, you know, trying to do sort of collaborations between TV Hits and MTV, and everyone was desperately trying to do these sort of third-party kind of collaborations, you know.
That's right, yeah.
So that's kind of where I sort of got my entree through, and, you know, I guess into what was seen as a, you know, a slightly more corporate marketing manager role.
And then when did you, I didn't even know this, because I think by this stage I might have been heading overseas. I'm not sure where I was, but your obviously friendship with Mary, was that from school days in Melbourne? Was that from high school?
No, that was, so it was from Melbourne, but when I was probably, I think kind of like 24, 25. So I was still with my English fiance, but we would be back and forth. We'd do some, you know, a year or two in Australia, and then a year or two in England. And so at one point I was back, and I was working at a marketing and advertising, DDB Needham and Rap Collins Worldwide was the marketing part. And at the time I'd sort of got myself in the door, because I was a rat bag at school. So I didn't have any good grades. No one was impressed with the way things ended with me at school. So I couldn't go knocking on no doors saying, hey, I'm really well educated, I've done so well. It's like, well, these F's, and she's a smart ass, and she's an arsehole, and she's this, do you know what I mean? Like, I had to really slime my way in any door to try and prove myself. So I knew that I needed to work somewhere where I found it at least interesting. So I went and got myself a job working on reception at this marketing company, which was part of this big advertising agency. Anyway, so it was there that I met Mary, because she came in as a sort of new, you know, marketing graduate or something like that. So that's where I first sort of got to know her, although we weren't initially friends, because I was sort of in the agency party crew, and she was quite straight. I mean, she was cool. No, cool's not the right word. She was, no, I don't think she was straight, like she was boring or anything like that, but she wasn't, you know, we thought we were very cool.
She wasn't, in the party crew. She wasn't.
Correct. She was a little more demure. So after a year or so, I just decided that she was quite refreshing, and I sort of, I don't even know whether she wanted to come, but I just hooked her around by the neck and said, right, you're coming out with us, and I'm going to look after you, and you need to, I think you've got a bit of fun in you, and I'm going to rattle it out of you.
Like Amber would do.
Yeah, exactly. The poor kid. No, well, she'd recently sort of had a breakup, and then her mother died very suddenly, which is really, to me, in my mind, is really when our friendship stepped up, because she called me to tell me that, and I thought that was such a big thing for me to be on her list of people to tell that her mother had died. that I thought, okay, I need to be something to this person.
You
Like
need
they
to be a
chose.
friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure why she had chosen me as one of the people to call, but I just knew that it was such a big thing that I wanted to be whatever friend she wanted me to be, and I wasn't sure what that was. But by that stage, I was very, very fond of her.
Oh, and so that's where the friendship began.
Yes, that's where the friendship started. And so I eventually broke up with my English boyfriend and moved up to Sydney with my new music job. And she ended up going overseas after her mum died. So when she called me, so by this stage I'm sort of like right in the core of like my music industry experience, no sleep, just, like literally, broken heart that I'm just totally conveniently parked, burning the candle at both ends. So when tired, drinking all hours, and like things are getting really messy, waking up the next day looking like bloody Courtney Love. And so when she called and said, I'm coming back to Australia, I'm thinking about whether I should come to Melbourne or Sydney. And I'm like, Sydney. Okay, and I literally hustled like a machine gun at her about why she should ditch Melbourne and come to Sydney. Because I'm like, Jesus, girl, I need you. I need some light. I need some stability.
You need some of your demure friend.
That is exactly. I need some demure in my life. I need to learn and suck that out of you.
So she came to Sydney, obviously.
So she did. Thank God she came to Sydney. Oh God, she really was a blessing. And to be honest, that is also, that is when we really became very, very, very close, because I think we were both having. Well, you've got to remember too, I think in terms of age, even though she's a couple of years younger than me, it was very much that
she's
sort of
my age. I think she's like my age.
Yes, she is. 2 years. Oh. Yeah, that's right. She's so.
Oh, I'm not 2 years younger than you. I'm only like 1 year, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh no. Well, I think she was born in 72. I think she was born in 72, actually, like me.
I think so. So. Yeah, she definitely too. I just working it from. I think her 50th is the year after next.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I got to get that.
Yeah.
Into my head
you got to embrace it, babe. Let's just show all of these little wankers that, like everybody wants to be 50. Everybody wants to be 50. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Did you know 50 is the new 40? That we weren't really. Well, we weren't really ready for 40 now. But look at us, Amber. Like, I don't look at you and go, "Oh, Amber, whoa, that's not what I thought when I was young." No. I used to go 50. That's like, I don't know.
No. I don't look at you and go, she's in her late 40s.
Yeah.
I don't. It's just. But no, I don't think I'm not really an ageist sort of.
It's all here.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Anyway, so yes, she came, and then it was just a sort of window of time where I think we were both very, very reflective about the world, as you would be when you've lost your mother suddenly, and you've just moved to a new city and you're single and all that sort of stuff. And I was very reflective because I'm still, hiding this very broken heart. But also I'm very much struggling, I think, like depression is on the way. All of this broken heart, correct, and all of this bad lifestyle, it's coming to get me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm kind of off the rails. Like, I'm going out, binge drinking, doing drugs, not all the time, but like, I was messy and not looking after myself. Yeah. So that space of time with her to be able to just talk and act was the first time I think I really had what I would call a spiritual friendship. Wow. Where you're talking about things that don't necessarily exist. They're just feelings about life and destiny and stuff like that. And that was very good for me.
You had no idea that how much your life was going to change from meeting Mary, because
God, no.
you probably were you with her when you were at the old slip-in where I used to frequent, when she met Frederick?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I think I can't remember exactly the exact night that she met him, but it almost coincides with, speaking of being off the rails, I think I was at a Pepsi Live, party on a boat, middle of the Olympics, free champagne, like cheap champagne. You don't realise when you're that young, cheap champagne is not, it's not your friend. It's not.
No, it's not your friend. I remember that year 2000. Oh, the Olympics! It was just the best parties. I was right there with you, Amber. I was right.
Yeah, it was like you can't even. Nothing will ever be as good as that period of time. Like it was just unbelievable. But so she was. But look, a lot of people say, she was just randomly met him at the slip-in. All of that's bullshit. That's just typical lazy media that prefer their version of the truth. The truth was that she happened to, know someone that knew the two cousins to the King of Spain, like they were Spanish royalty. And, and then there was a group of them, European royals, they know each other. They're related, know each other. So there was sort of half a dozen, I think, of these very sort of senior royals, crown prince kind of range, Norway, Spain, Denmark, and maybe Greece, even though they're not official royals anymore. Anyway, so it was this girl that Mary lived with or was friends with and said, I'm going to put together this group, invite a couple of extras, Mary being one of them. So it was an organised dinner, but it was at the slip-in because they wanted something casual. That's my memory of it anyway.
That's right, yeah. And the funny thing is, back then, I was in Sydney then, one of my best friends, who I called Little Miss Lawyer, she lives in Melbourne, she was there and she met her husband that night. No. Yeah, like it's just
really
weird, Amber. Yeah, it's just weird. And they met at the slip-in because we all make a joke about those two. Oh, yeah, you met at the slip-in. Both lawyers.
Yeah,
it was like after work drinks or whatever. Certainly not at royals or whatever, but they have that. We met where the royals met.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is about that time, as you know, it's like every bar in that Sydney CBD-ish near the water was at its best, living its best life. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the slip-in was, the best version of itself that it's ever been, and as was every other kind of bar. And there were lots of bars you could have bumped into someone pretty friggin' major.
That's right. Remember that the establishment was where women go to pick up suits. Remember, everyone said, "Oh yeah, you go there to pick." That's where women go to pick the dry cleaners. We used to call it the dry cleaners.
That's right. I'm going to the dry cleaners. Oh my God. But that was such a beautiful place, especially again during the Olympics. Man, it was just gorgeous.
Little did I know back then, I used to make a joke about the dry cleaners, the establishment, and that's where I end up meeting my husband years later at the dry cleaners.
You did too. You did? Oh. Well, that makes me feel even worse that there's another place that I didn't.
Well, I was at a cool meeting with some music people upstairs in that restaurant. I think it was that fancy restaurant, tab, whatever.
Been called a few things, but it's really beautiful.
Was back then, and I came down the lift into that general bar area, the dry cleaners, and went to the bar to get another wine, and that's how we met. I mean, now he's my ex-husband, but that was where I'm, it was like life going, here you used to call it the dry cleaners, then you meet.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, so did I just pick up a suit?
Yeah, and he wasn't. It was a Sunday, so he was been at the rugby, but he was a suit. Like, he was in casual clothes, but it was like, oh, strike me down. I've met someone at the dry cleaners.
I've become a statistic. Oh, well, I'm sure it was good for a while.
Yeah. Well, probably, 14 years of my life. It's a long time.
That's a long
But,
time.
it ended, and it's a hard thing. And it's a very hard thing,
Yeah,
especially
things are
terrible.
difficult.
Divorce and that whole, it's horrible. I know anyone that's listening that's been through it, you just know it's a very, very difficult thing, especially when there's a child involved and he lives on the other side of the world. So
Oh my God.
I have a son who never sees his dad. Ugh. Very.
So, sorry, where does his dad live?
He lives in Boston.
Wow, right. Oh my God. So, wow.
Very. He probably 6 years he's been in Boston now, and Jem's only 8. So it's very, very tough. So we split just before Jem was 2, like your life. But it's very, very difficult. His dad is his idol. He idolizes his dad.
This is the thing. Do you know, I think I've done thankfully I've done a hell of a lot of therapy since many of these days we're talking about. And yeah, I might just interject to say that I'm not still a mess, hopefully.
No.
But I did, one of the many things that I've done was this thing called an inner child workshop. And the whole concept of inner child, or part of it is the hierarchy of the family. So, for instance, and this is obviously, not absolutely this is always the way it is, but in terms of the statistics, and say I was in a room with 12 people, it was these theories were almost 100% the whole time. There was maybe one person that was like, oh, no, that doesn't relate to me. But so they basically say that the eldest in a family is naturally more in sync and needs the father, needs to have a good relationship with the father. So if they don't have a good relationship with the father, they're offline. They're really there is something that is difficult for them. For me, and then the second in a family is the same. It's with the mother, a natural affiliation, or there is a need with the mother. Then the third is about the overall family. They need the overall. They care more about the overall dynamic, so they're not as clingy or as needy of the relationship, or the affinity isn't there as strongly with one particular parent. It's more the overall unit. And then once it goes to the fourth, it's back to the father, and then it plays out like that.
I'm the fourth. I'm the fourth child in my. There's only 4 kids in my family. So, as you were speaking, I was thinking of my oldest brother. Then my sister was second. Then my other brother, third, and then
so
fourth.
Is your oldest brother?
He least has the least relationship with my dad.
Okay, and
he was 15 when my mum and dad split, so very hard time for him.
Has he had a hard time of it? Is he?
They just don't have much contact at all. Yet the rest of us all do.
Yeah,
but he doesn't.
Well, I mean, it's hard to know. But you know what? I use this theory often when I'm talking to people, or there's a family issue or whatever. I will say, I'll ask the question, is your brother the eldest in the family? And they'll say yes. And honestly, the strike rate is pretty high in terms of, say, for instance, the person then saying, yeah, actually they are, yes, they're the eldest. Yes, the issue is with the father there, or it's that kind of it's interesting. I
hear you. That makes a lot of sense, because I'm probably the closest to my mum, being the baby of the family. They all say, oh, the favorite, but I was the baby, the youngest, and mum had 4 kids then on her own, so I was the youngest. So yes, maybe we are the closest because of that.
Oh, no. Your other siblings are growing up and moving. She's still in care mode. That. And if your father was around,
Yeah, he moved, and I used to go on holidays on the plane, similar to you used to fly on holidays to
Yeah.
see your dad. Same, it's the same situation.
So
But
interesting, isn't
so
it?
your life, like you got thrust then after you went to the royal wedding, Amber, and your life just got publicly put everywhere. You were on front of every magazine. You were
Yeah.
just thrust into this, not
Yeah.
Amber Petty anymore. You were Mary's best friend, Mary's bridesmaid. Your whole career then wasn't even thought of. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very intense. It was really intense for, I think, 3 reasons. One is that most people that could have been in my situation wouldn't, maybe the best friend and bridesmaid might have been working at a bank or might have been a teacher or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Still would have been attention, that kind of thing. I was working at the very magazine companies that's churning out the weekly bullshit stories about royals. I am in the lion's den.
Oh no.
I'm there. I'm like trapped inside with Satan. And so
Was that the no idea?
I was at no idea at that point. I mean, can you fucking believe it? So I'm like, so I had to go, I came back to a job, and of course they're all obsessed with the whole thing. And here I'm just fresh off the back. And so there would be so many times when so my role was, I was marketing manager, but then I ended up getting a sort of an extension, and then I got a column, which obviously, was sort of offered like, that it was sort of like, I knew that it was influenced obviously by this found fame that I had. So that was, I had to really weigh up a lot of things going, would I have got this otherwise? All of that sort of bullshit. But it was very difficult. It was the start of feeling very lonely because, I would walk into my office and they might be having an editorial meeting with 20 people, and then suddenly everyone would stop talking when I walk in, because of course they're planning their shonky Mary story for the week.
Oh no.
And yeah, and so, and so every Monday would be so awkward, because I'm now coming into my employer, and then I'm picking up the magazine and usually looking at the front page and going, what a load of bullshit. That's not true. And then, of course, and then also, like as magazine, and it's not just New Idea, as magazines do when they say a source said, and I just knew, I felt that they were really cranking up in their stories, a source said, because didn't that look great? Looked like it was stupid old me, didn't it?
Like it was you.
And they knew that. They knew that. And they knew by offering me this sort of like column, and I was always trying to sort of supposedly fight the sort of naive, good fight in terms of when I was offered the column. I was also going, I also nearly left to go and work for OK Magazine, because they were just starting. And I was so conscious of this sort of ugliness of this obsession with Mary, and the new editor of OK Magazine in Australia was like, we don't want you for that. You are going to be doing your own stories. They're going to be nothing, blah, blah, blah. So that was very enticing, but they just didn't have the sort of solid budget behind it and longevity that New Idea had and that kind of thing. So I did end up staying at New Idea. And I did end up taking the column, and I said, right, if I'm doing a column and I'm speaking to celebrities or I'm doing whatever, my words can't be changed. I'm not doing gossip, mean stories. This is going to be, half of these celebrities are not going to want to talk to me, because I come from New Idea. I'm going to have to hustle and convince them to take my word and my integrity, even though I come from a space of zero. Absolutely zero integrity. But of course, while I'm trying to have my own win and feather my own nest, but also try and kind of like create some integrity between me and my bosses, they're just going, great, just say yes, put her in the magazine. Because then when everybody in Australia knows that she's working for us, obviously every time we want to do a Mary story and we say a source says, everyone's going to assume it's Amber, that it's verified. So they were they were smart, and most of me understood that, but you're just always hoping that maybe you're being super paranoid and it's not.
Yeah, so
bad.
that's why it came across that they were saying source. They just, that would have been very difficult for you, Amber, like working there, and then people thinking that you're saying that,
Right.
and that would have been, and you're Mary's friend, so it would be like, hang on, I'm not leaking anything, or I'm not,
That's exactly right. And I know for a fact there was lots of moments in those early years where, people in Denmark, around my friend would have been thinking, hang on, what's going on here with this
going on
best
with
friend?
Amber? Yeah.
100%. So I had a very, very rough time where I was almost constantly feeling shame and guilt over things that I hadn't even done, because I was really in such an insecure, bad way as it was. It didn't take much for me to make me extra insecure, and I really was in the eye of this storm. And what nobody cared about was the fact that, for me, forget the royal wedding and everything, I'd lost my best friend.
Yeah, I know.
They're going to be hanging out, every Saturday in Bondi, just talking till all hours and stuff. Like,
she's gone now over to Denmark, and you're grieving her as well.
Right. And people no one really cared about that. And I guess I didn't realise that I was grieving too, because someone doesn't have to die for you to be grieving. That's what people do.
Well, she's on the other side of the world. She's on the other side of the world. Now she's in the royal family. Off about to, what you were together as best friends.
That's
and then have you stayed friends with Mary as she has?
Yes, the whole way.
Oh, great. That is so lovely. I'm so glad. Yeah. I'm so glad, because I remember them trying to make out like, now there's problems with Amber and Mary. I'd never believe anything in those magazines, Amber, but I had to ask you.
You're too smart. They've definitely over the years come up with all sorts of. The storyline for many years was, that just I was an embarrassment. I was a disgrace. That, no one thought, the Queen didn't want me around, and all of these things. I think the Queen's sitting around talking about whether she wants me around. I mean, I think she's got other things to talk about.
Exactly.
Please, like the whole royal court are sitting around going, "What do we do?
What about Amber Petty and that magazine in Australia?
She's going to ruin the oldest monarchy in the world."
Yeah.
So there was that, and then there was the most recent ones were that the royal family, or the Queen again, she gets dragged into it. It was trying to get Mary to give me up as a friend because I was a witch.
What?
Yeah.
A witch?
Yeah. They were doing. Women's Day was doing a lot of that gear a couple of years ago. And do you know what? And so here, because I live a pretty private life, tucked away in a nice little Melbourne suburb and all of that sort of stuff. And I hadn't had. This is quite funny, although it didn't feel funny on the day. It had been a few years since anyone gave a shit about me or did any of the royal bridesmaid gear. So I thought I was sort of in the clear. And I don't even know what kicked this off. Maybe it was a very, very slow week at it must have been a very slow week in trashy women's mags. Anyway, so Women's Day decided to do, because they follow my Instagram. So every now and again, something will trigger something, and again, slow week. And I must have posted something a bit witchy, which I do a lot. I mean, I've got a card called the Tarot Tea House. That is sort of a thing. But so anyway, so they decided that the Queen was worried about me and my.
Can I just pause for 1 second? Someone's at my door, and I don't want to miss this bit. So I'll just put an edit here in, Josh, because someone's annoying me. Hang on.
Thanks, Josh. We need you.
Sorry, Amber. Hang on.
That's all right. I've got some water.
We'll just do a pick up there, Josh. So you were saying about a slow day in the magazine.
Yeah. So they must have been having a slow day at Women's Day this particular week. And so they've decided they want to do a story about how the royal family, in particular the Queen, is trying to get Mary to get rid of me because I'm a witch. And
witch?
Yeah. So I know, it's fantastic. So they ended up, I mean, I can't believe this. So I'm just, I have my regular routine. I get up in the morning, look like a bag of shit, put my little coat on, and I take my little dogs for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
But I was probably doing it a little bit more regularly, but every other, week or day or whatever, I might take an oracle deck and I might go and sit in nature and do myself an oracle reading. So this day that they'd obviously set the photographer to go find Amber. I mean, and it scares the shit out of me how they found me too. But anyway, so I go and do my oracle reading on the oval that I normally go to, blah, 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 blah. Well, the following week, they run this story and, oh, no, that's right.
Of course, you're doing like oracle, like angel type cards in the park.
Oh, no, this one was even better. It was my unicorn deck. So I'm doing a unicorn oracle card reading down at the local park. Anyway, so Phil Kosh from Women's Day rings me as I'm, getting about my week. And he says, oh, look, I just wanted to get a comment from you. We're running this story, blah, blah, blah. Someone's got a photo of you down at the park with a unicorn, with a pack of unicorn cards. And they're running it next week. And I'm like, is this a prank? I mean, am I being punked here? I mean, you've got, what, me with my unicorn? Honestly, it couldn't have sounded more ridiculous. Anyway, so he wanted a quote. Anyway.
What? What was he after a quote for?
I guess wanting to confirm whether there was issues between myself and the Queen and her wanting to get rid of me because I'm a witch. I mean, how does one comment on something?
I wish you were down in the park in some dress-up gear with a hat.
I know. If only I'd known, I could have actually camped it.
Can you imagine you put the witch's hat on?
Oh,
even like a construction one, the orange witch's hat.
And a little cauldron, just sort of mixing it up with the two dogs going, what's in that, Mum?
Bubble, toilet, trouble.
Oh my God. Anyway, so and
anyone listening, do you understand those magazines that if you do buy and you think that is gospel, it is all crap when it says sources close to Amber say she is practicing witchcraft.
Oh my God. Yeah, and it's it does sadden me that anybody would believe anything that is written in those magazines. It's just terrifying. But unfortunately, people still do. Less so now, but certainly back in the day, everyone did. I was constantly people saying, "Is Mary having like 25 children next week?" I'm like, "Where'd you read that? Do you think that that's true?" Oh, well, it says it. I'm like, oh God, like I felt like I spent a decade trying to educate people on the fact that no, not everything you read is true. Anyway, but when that article came out, I had huge anxiety, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, firstly, the photos and when they want to get an ugly photo of you, they will give it. So here's me looking, honestly, I could not have looked any more haggard. I mean, I looked like I was like 70, and I'm not being rude to 70-year-olds, but I wasn't 70, so I shouldn't look it. And I look like a bag of shit, and they've got all of these photos of me, and they're basically saying, that I'm a witch. Now, it certainly doesn't worry me now, but at the time, it triggered so many things because unfortunately there's still people that consider witches, which are spiritual women, like get with the goddamn program, Jesus. That look, like I was on some working committees for some big not-for-profits, and they if they have like Catholic backgrounds or a few religious backgrounds, people get really weird about that stuff.
Yeah,
I had shocking anxiety, and that actually could have, it shouldn't, but that actually could have created a lot of harm in my work life and what have you, you know?
So you've had an amazing career, like also because you were in radio in Adelaide. I won't touch on everything there because people that are listening can look up your podcast, but one in particular that I absolutely love, that one you did for a US company, Love and Hate. Love and Radio, was it Love and
Love and Radio?
Love and Radio, Love and Radio, and it's a brilliant, just a brilliant storyteller, and it shows also, we won't go into it, but that there's so many scammers out there. I was gripped by that podcast, Amber. Gripped. I was just there, right in there.
Yeah, and I can't I can't take any credit in terms of, you know, all I did was answer the questions and step out what they wanted to know. But as sort of a background, I've written this book. It's still being edited, but it'll hopefully be out in May next year. And actually, I will do a little plug if that's okay. The book is called This Is Not a Love Song, and there is a pre-order available now on Apple and, you know, all of the...
wow, great.
Yeah, well, I've just put that up there because Love and Radio and another American podcast called Snap Judgment are both doing a little piece from my book. Well, it's actually not a little piece, it's a big piece. And essentially what you're referring to and what you've heard is this part of my book, which relates to a catfish on steroids experience that I had happen to me while I was a radio host, and it happened to our listeners, and it happened to everything. So I won't go into detail about it now, but it is a mind-blowing story.
It's a mind-blowing story, and it's about a very, very, very sick woman. And coming from a radio background myself, I know how invested you get with your listeners, and you just believe them. But it's a brilliant story.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant story to make everyone aware there are these scammers out there that are very, very, very good at what they do. They have no conscience, and they're very ill people.
Very, very ill people. And I think the people that are susceptible are certainly it wouldn't happen to me now. Just wouldn't. Like, it literally just wouldn't happen to me. I'd be like, well, who's this person? Like, I'm wary of everything, and I'm no bullshit now. I'm like, but I was, when this experience happened to me, which was when I was on radio in Adelaide. So I was on radio between 2007 to sort of middle of 2010. But when this catfish incident first started, it was the middle of 2008. 2008. What does that mean?
Yeah, I understand. We understand you.
Thank you. I have the occasional bit of dyslexia, and I confuse myself even though it's my own word. And so it happened then, and then dragged out until, or parts of it dragged out until, 2010, and actually was still going on at the start of this year, because the catfish, after 10 years, reached out to me and said, I'm ready to come clean. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to get redemption. So I was going to, so that Love and Radio episode you heard, they're doing a follow-up episode, which is pretty much all the catfish talking about how she found our radio, because she was Canadian, how she found our radio station, how and why she created multiple characters, what she did with a whole lot of money that was given to her by our listeners and by our station, her mental health. She came to Australia. She stayed with me. I mean, it is the most mind-blowing. So, yes, so I finally, as I was literally heading towards writing my last chapter of the book, and I'm thinking, I can't really wrap up that part of the story because I still don't know what this girl's motivation was. I had found her on Facebook, but she blocked me, so I didn't really know how to get to her. Although Love and Radio had reached out to her, and there is a little bit of a cryptic kind of bit from her at the end. But I was going to just have to sort of be at peace that at the end of the book, you know, there would be no kind of explanation of who this girl was. I more wrote it about, well, why did I allow this to happen to me? How did I get myself into it?
Amber, that could have happened to anyone. It's not just you. Like any radio announcers that are listening to this podcast, it could happen to any. I've been on breakfast. I hear these sort of stories all the time, Amber, where you know, feel so sorry for the listener, and the listeners ring in and give money. You know, this goes on all the time. So it's not just you who, you know, I was listening to it and quite teary because I didn't know where that was going. And but I was like, you know, you're doing and then
because you're getting dragged along with the story that I thought was true from the catfish, and it's this tragic love story. And of course, yeah, I'm invested in it as well until, of course, things start to go, hang on. But the problem was, where I absolutely take full ownership, is that what she managed to get out of me was way bigger than was ever necessary. And if I had been in a better mental state, and if I hadn't been so kind of lonely and disempowered by my issues and parking all of my shit that's now really manifesting into my actual life of like, there's lots of darkness, she didn't need to get the airtime, literally. I'm not talking on radio. She didn't need to get my personal airtime like I gave it to her. And I certainly didn't need to invite her to stay in my home.
I just, you know, that is just unbelievable. So that psycho came into your house.
Yeah, there was something wrong with me.
No, absolutely not. And, you know, you're just giving. You're just giving and kind and generous like I am. But now, you know, even listening to that story, I'm even more wary. Like, you know, I'm already wary because, you know, a con man has come into my life years back, and I picked it very quickly. But that's the intuition and the gut feeling. You got to follow it.
That's right.
But you know, you didn't have a partner, Amber. You're like, yeah, come and stay at my house. I get that. I totally get that.
I was at my lowest and loneliest.
And I just think this book, your book, I can't wait. I will be first on that pre-order. When I see it being made into like a Dirty John.
Yeah. Well,
honestly.
Yeah, it is very, very Dirty John. And actually, I was sort of inspired by Dirty John in that. And I don't mean to put shit on the women, the victims in that story at all. I have enormous empathy and compassion for them. But what I was frustrated with that story was there just was no showing of ownership or pennies dropping of, hang on, you know, because one of the things, like, I used to have like, and you know, and I write this in my book, I think most people have a lot of voices going on in their head, and they don't usually articulate most of them. And half the battle is trying to work out what is your higher self, what is your ego, which will often just be telling you a whole lot of negative shit and just keeping you on that rhythm of panic. And but once I sort of started committing and doing some healing, I made way, I feel, for these lighter voices, like my higher self. And one of the things that came through to me, literally just like a quote that I went, oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? Okay, I'm going to think about that. Was, if it's happening to you, it's about you. So I started kind of using that as a filter.
I really love that. I'm going to make sure I write
it. It's amazing, isn't it?
If it's happening to you, it's about you.
Yes. So obviously I don't mean anything horrific like, you know, child abuse, like, you know, those sort of things. No. But if you take all of those, obviously those things out of it. But, you know, I was an adult and there was a lot of bad shit going on, and I'd had a lot of brutal, I'd had some very bad relationships, including, you know, what was going on at me with radio, with what I felt was a very toxic culture, and obviously this whole catfishing, you know, extravaganza, that I had to kind of look and say, okay, all right, so let me think about that. If it's happening to me, it's about me. And so it really, rather than putting all my kind of like focus on, why are these people doing this to me? Why is she like this? What did I, you know, I had to sort of go, hang on, but I let all of them in. why have I let them in? What's the pattern here? You know, what's my stuff that I've got to work out here?
Yes.
Because I'm actually the most dangerous person in this equation for me.
Yeah.
And that's when I went, okay, well, I'm putting myself on a 12-month relationship ban, because I was scared of where my relationships were heading. They were getting worse and worse, but they were also, you know, relationships. You know, I let another stranger in, which was really this catfish, and it was just because I didn't see her as a romantic situation,
No.
but she was still a stranger, and she came in and she raped and pillaged.
Look, it was a brilliant listen. So I can't wait for the full story in the book, because I think it'll be an absolute, I think it'll be a bestseller, Amber, because it deserves to be. I really do. I'm going to make that. I was very good at picking the hits back in the day, so I'm going to pick it as a hit.
Oh my God, I love that. Well,
I really do. And I know you never you haven't had the marriage and the relationship, but I know that you only have got to be a mother, and I wasn't a mother till 39. So I was very, very lucky to become a mother. But you take in foster children. Oh, that is just beautiful, Amber.
Yeah, I started that oh God, I started that at the start of 2018. The reason why I go, oh God, is because I think about it, and then my dad literally died 3 months after I took on my first little girl, who was living with me full time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I was like, oh my God. But you know, like there was part of me that at the time it was like, oh my God, if I'd ever known that my dad was going to be this sick and then die, I would never have, you know, put my hand up to be a foster carer at this time. But that's not quite the bigger picture. I now realize that she was such this great love that came into my life, that I also see that I think my father saw that he could leave me because I had found love, you know, because love,
that's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Like literally love is love, and you don't have to be a gay person to relate to that. You know, it is love is love. And honestly, she was, because also I had a reason to get up in the morning. I had to get up. This little person's going, you know, what's happening? What are we doing? So
what are we doing today? I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry. And she'd speak at 100 miles an hour, because she was also she was still highly traumatized. So I've got a highly traumatized child living with me. So they're very revved, and I'm very sensitive. So, but she was also very sensitive. So I naturally became very aware to her behavior, and I wanted to nurture her. And also she didn't care about my dad dying. She's like, I mean, we left the hospital when we found out that he was dying, and she's like, so is your dad gonna die? Oh. She just kept saying it. So is your dad gonna die? I mean, it was so bad. And I'm like, got tears. I'm trying not to really cry in front of her, but I'm also wanting to be honest, because I'm like, this kid's had some bad history at hospitals, and this kid no longer has a relationship with her father. So I'm really conscious of, I don't want to be crying in front of this child about my father, because I love him so much, because I'm conscious. I don't want this kid to go, well, hang on, that's not my experience of my dad.
No.
And anyway, but she was so funny that she naturally kept taking me out of this grief, because she just didn't give a shit. She's just like,
that's good.
So your dad's
died. He's died. He's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, moving right along. Okay, fine. I mean, she was just, you know, just so fun.
That's kids. That is just kids.
It is. It really is. And so I can, but she really was a huge love. Oh. And if I hadn't have had her when Dad died, I would have been very alone and in a bad place.
Meant to be. So then does she then go back to her family or whatever when?
So she was with me full time for 9 months, and there was a little window of time where she was never going to go back with her father, and the mother was missing, that it looked like, and there was no other family that was right to for her to live with. So there was a tiny window of time where I started to think, okay, well, if this kid ends being put out to, the system for a permanent ongoing carer like a guardian, then I think, because as a foster carer, you're not inclined to do that. That's not your role.
It's not your role.
Short term, that's right. This is not the role. So, the foster agencies have got to be very mindful that you're not feeling like, oh, okay, so are you going to save the day by having this child for the rest of its, his or her life?
That's right.
But with this little girl, I really, you try not to fall in love, and you don't fall in love with every kid, you don't.
You don't.
But with this little girl, I just did, and I would have taken her forever. And then, because she was just, I'm still in contact with her. I haven't seen her for over a year, but we speak regularly, and I absolutely love her.
It's beautiful, Amber.
I'll be leaving all of my cool stuff and jewelry and stuff to this girl. I just love her so much. I really do. Anyway, but she went back to her mother over a period of time. But I did stay in her life in terms of her. She came and stayed with me. I'd pick her up from school every Friday and have her till the end of Saturday because her mum had a job, and so that went on for another year, and until her mum sort of shut that down. But now I've had several kids for smaller periods of time.
You're a living angel. We need more people like you, Amber. She was very, very, very fortunate to have you too.
I was, you know what? We were really lucky to have each other. We and I think that going back to sort of like that sort of fairly toxic growing up belief that marriage doesn't work, that all of these traditional kind of pretty healthy normal things ahead in life aren't going to happen for you. One of the things that wasn't toxic but may have been influenced by my childhood was that when I was a kid I would say, I'm not going to have my own children, I'm going to adopt. I thought that was what I meant. Was I wanted to care for a child that was in a bad situation. So and I think I probably, because I was so sensitive and easily hurt by things, that I already naturally knew that there was kids out there that were hurting. And so it was just something that decades later that I went, I think I need to honour that thing now.
And, good for you. That's just brilliant. It's beautiful, Amber. I'm so proud of you.
I wish more people would look into it, to be honest. It's not easy.
I don't think it's easy, and a lot of people would realise it's not easy. But good on you, because, there's you, again, the hustler. You got so much damn grit. You have so much grit.
Oh
and what now? What now for Amber Petty? What now?
So, Amber Petty is in lockdown in Melbourne.
Oh, you look pretty. You look pretty in lockdown.
Oh, thank you. Well, I did put some makeup on and a fancy skivvy for you, only for you. But no, I'm any minute now I'm going to have my editor come back to me with my book and hopefully not tell me it's a piece of crap. But either way, I will have time. Either way, I'll have the time to edit this book. I'm also working on a new little tech company which will be related to death and capturing memories and various things like that. Yeah, so that's kind of a big thing that I have the time to do now, which is awesome. I'm also trying to write a book of short stories about dreams.
Wow, I love dreams.
Oh, good.
I love them.
Did you listen to that episode of my podcast, The Wise Guides, The Dream?
I listened to Bose.
Yeah,
but I haven't listened to. Yeah, I haven't listened to the dreams because you said.
Oh, you must.
I will.
It's her name's Kristen. Oh shit! You know what? If you looked at, it's
I'll look
probably
it up. I've got it.
Early episodes. Yeah, early episodes.
It was an early episode.
Yeah, it's me talking about to a dream analyst. But there's some really cool special effects and sound. You'll love it as a radio broadcasting person. Listen to it. So,
and you've got the Tarot Tea House. Now, I've seen that.
Yes, so that's right. So the Tarot Tea House is a little business that I started in February, at the start of February, that is literally kind of, in the essence, it's a bit of a kind of like rock and roll, spiritual, mystical brand. I kind of, it's like, think kind of tarot, but think Stevie Nicks playing in the background, so it's less kind of like, psychic expo, and it's a little bit more rock and roll spiritual. So I've got these fabulous t-shirts with this very rock and roll image of the high priestess on them. And so I was doing events at some venues in Melbourne. It was literally just, pretty much girls' nights, coming and having cocktails, listening to Stevie Nicks and having tarot readings.
Oh, wow.
And it went berserk. Like we had 6 weeks sold out. I couldn't stop this thing. I'm like, hang on, I don't even have time to sort of like sit back and review how this is working, because the bookings just kept coming in. So anyway, we're doing online readings at the moment. So if anyone wants one, you can contact me at contact@amberpetty.com.au. And but that did go that unfortunately sort of like went very quiet in the first lockdown. But things are definitely picking up in this second lockdown, because I think people are, well, not everyone's in as big a lockdown as us in Melbourne, but I think a lot of people, understandably were caught up in a collective what's going on, and now people are yearning to sort of go, okay, what's happening for me? What's the energy around me? Because a lot of us have changed quite profoundly in good ways since this pandemic. And so I think it's really, tarot also was really one of my big healing self-help discoveries. And what I did love about it was that it really kind of spoke to this sort of, invisible energy that is around us, and whatever frequencies we've got going on, if we're in a good or bad place, things will unfold, and you will be attracted to people and situations that are a match to that. So I love tarot. It's pretty cool.
We have had some big eclipses this year happening, after one, after the next, after the next.
It's
amazing,
been,
especially lately.
Do you know, also just going back to that, because I'm like a fan of this one podcast of mine called The Wise Guides, which is the one that I did with Nova Entertainment. Anyway, there is an episode in there which is still really interesting, and it's this energetic forecaster. Her name's Elizabeth Peru. And so when I recorded her, it was 2016, which was the year where, the George Michael, there was 3 big artists that died that year. It must have been David Bowie, was it the same year? Anyway, and there was stuff about Trump. So Trump was coming in.
Sure.
Her energy forecast about that year, 2016, and why these big pop stars, rock stars, musicians chose to leave that year. Fascinating insights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amber, yeah, I'm just, I think that you're just amazing. I didn't know about you being a foster carer, which just shows the sweetness of you. You are a really caring person. Is there any, other than that saying you said before, is that the saying that you live by? Is that your sort of motto? If there's a motto that Amber Petty, that's your saying?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'd have to go, because there's so many. I do love interesting quotes, and I often discover new people. Often they're unfortunately dead by the time I discover them. But these beautiful who was that guy? Oh God, I can't remember his name. What a shame. Anyway, but I find really interesting quotes all the time, and they often, the really good ones do stay in my head. So I could spout, things. I guess probably, when I was younger, that Marilyn Monroe quote really resonated with me, which was, you know, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. And I really loved that, because I guess I really identified with that, you know, I've spent many, many years probably at my worst. So why should someone come along and just go, oh no, I don't like messy Amber. Oh, but we'll have this new empowered.
I like this Amber.
Totally. How about you go fuck yourself? Because you know what? I can occasionally be the other one as well. And if you don't like the story of the other one, you don't deserve the one that worked their ass off to get to where we are now. So I think, but I do, yeah. I think my saying is the one that came to myself, which must have been my higher self, and that is, you know, if it's happening to you, it's about you.
I love it. It's just, that is
just a really good way, a helpful way to take you out of victim. You know, like these people, like they don't.
And so many people don't. They won't recognise it. They don't. They go, and she is like,
no, it's like, don't worry about any of that.
All the way to time. And I'm like, hang on, but what are you doing to create?
That's right. And I reckon, and I reckon sometimes when I describe my situation, like people have said to me, oh, I think you're a bit hard on yourself. And I'm thinking, okay, it might be my language. I'm not hard on myself now. I'm actually nurturing, but I also call myself on my own shit. I ain't going to sugarcoat shit when I can see clearly where I went wrong.
Yeah, and you stand up and say, I own that. If there's a song, Amber, to end this podcast, if there's a song that sums up, I mean, coming from so much music background, there's a song that sums up Amber Petty. What is it? What is Amber's song?
I think the one that I'm going to choose, because it really uplifted me when I was trying to be brave, but when I was still in a bit of a messy, you know, mental health stage, was Katie Tunstall's Suddenly I See. And it's this just beautiful. Do you know that one?
Yes.
You know, it's like, her face is a map of the world. It's just this really, I don't know, what I took from it, you know, lyrically, and just the energy of it was, you know, I've been around the block. I've been around the world. It's, you know what I mean? You can, you know, but it's this sense that, you know, we're all beautiful. We all essentially are beautiful people, but we've been to sort of hell and back, a lot of us. And I guess it just sort of, I guess I was also just always hoping, and now much more hopeful, that people can see that I'm a beautiful girl without me constantly sort of thinking, oh God, I feel misunderstood, you know? So I think that's a lovely
Well,
song.
I understand you, and I thank you so much. I feel really honoured to have you on my podcast, because you are such a brilliant podcaster yourself. Thank you for joining Pure Grit. You have grit. You have got it, Amber. You're a hustler, baby. Thank you so much for joining the show. And maybe slip in a sponsor here. I think I need Amber Petty's help. I think I need to hire her, I think, everyone.
Oh, yeah, we need to talk about getting
it's time for me to approach someone. Thank you,
100.
Amber.
Thank you, beautiful.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed Amber Petty. Stay tuned for next week. Oh, a ninja warrior who's amazing. Dr. Espen Hjalmby. It's hard to say. He's a Viking. Please make sure you please like below, subscribe and share. Look me up on the socials. Please leave me a comment. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.